Hi, and welcome back to the Contemporary Old West channel with B.F. Biles. In today's episode, you'll hear Chapter 5 of my novel, Hunting Charm, and in today's Plate of History Beans, we'll take a brief look at writer Larry McMurtry, author of the novel Lonesome Dove. If you like my writing, I hope you'll visit my author's page on Amazon, link below. If you're interested in signed copies of Hunting Charm or any of my novels, please check out my Patreon page, also with a link below. If you enjoy the video, I'd be grateful if you hit the subscribe button. So without further ado, this is Chapter 5 of Hunting Charm on the Contemporary Old West channel with B.F. Biles. Chapter 1 through 4 recap. First, if you haven't listened to the first 4 chapters, let me encourage you to do so. I think you'll enjoy the story more with a deeper understanding of the characters found in those chapters. However, if you want to forge ahead, here's a quick recap. In chapters 1 through 4, we meet most of the central characters. Cecil Johnson and his wife, Cynthia, a mysterious slave everyone calls Cactus Branch, Doreen Tarwater, the daughter of Abilene, Kansas stockyard owner Theo Tarwater, and a pair of cowboy detectives named Matt Grayson and Hunter Brantley. We learn that former Buffalo soldier Cecil Johnson traveled to Abilene to sell 20 mules. As he leaves Abilene, he is unaware that Doreen Tarwater, fleeing an abusive home life, has stowed away in the back of Cecil's second wagon, a rig driven by the cataract blind and nearly deaf Mr. Sugars. A few weeks later, word gets back to Theo Tarwater that his daughter has been killed. That's when he calls the pair of cowboy detectives, Matt and Brent. The novel moves back and forth in time, filling in details about what happened to Doreen as Matt and Brent uncover things. In Chapter 4, Doreen, who doesn't want to return to Abilene, threatens to claim Cecil Johnson kidnapped her and behaved improperly if they take her back. Because Cecil and Mr. Sugars are black, this terrifies them. In Chapter 5, The Search Party, we travel to Abilene the day following Doreen's departure and learn of Theo Tarwater's reaction to his daughter's disappearance. So without further ado, this is Chapter 5 of Hunting Charm, The Search Party. Chapter 5, The Search Party. Theo Tarwater spent most evenings in the company of Delilah Henry, a woman who worked at the Pennyback Saloon near the stockyards. Delilah, a stout young Irish girl, didn't mind that people compared Theo to an overweight and surly male pig. Indeed, when Theo made crude comments or drank too much, Delilah laughed right along and matched him drink for drink. For her part, Delilah enjoyed spending all her time with Theo. It meant she didn't have to bunk down with a series of other unwashed cowboys. In a similar fashion, Ruth Tarwater had grown indifferent to both Doreen and Theo. When she wasn't sitting in her chair reading, she spent time with a group of other middle-aged wives in stale relationships, discussing books, fashion, politics, or local gossip. On the day of Doreen's flight, Ruth Tarwater spent the evening reading and discussing a series of risque passages by the French author de Sade with her book circle. Ruth had also been sipping brandy and nipping laudanum throughout the day. Foggy from the combination of alcohol and opium, she simply didn't notice that Doreen, who remained in her room most of the time, wasn't at home. When Ruth discovered her daughter's absence the next day, she alerted her husband. Since Doreen had disappeared for a day or two on multiple occasions in the past, Theo didn't react immediately. Even though Doreen had calmed considerably following the botched abortion, he reckoned she might simply be getting back up to speed. The thought of Doreen's indiscretions infuriated Theo, but the stockyard and Delilah Henry were generally enough to engage his senses, so he adopted a wait-and-see attitude. It wasn't until the evening of the second day that he considered the possibility his daughter had left Abilene.
She's lost all sense of what's proper, and when she's home, we'll put her in leg irons,
he told his wife that evening.
Don't start, Theo. How will people react if we chain our daughter? I don't give a damn what your snooty friends think. That prissy bunch of bookworms can kiss my rosy ass.
Don't be disgusting. After more arguing, Ruth and Theo decided that the following day a group of men would be dispatched to find their wayward lamb. Then Theo departed to rendezvous with Delilah at the Pennyback, while Ruth retired to her bed, a bottle of brandy, and the sedate adventures of Adam Bede. The next morning, Theo awoke late and hungover from the previous night. Upon arriving at the stockyards, he summoned Claude Hallam, his foreman, and asked that 3 of their best men be employed to find his daughter. When Claude asked Theo where the men might look, Theo replied,
I said she'd run off. I didn't say where she might be. She's probably off in some cowboy's room. It's your job to figure out which one. Just find her.
Claude observed Theo's bloodshot eyes, knew any further questioning would be useless. The stockyard foreman had learned not to squander time with useless queries. He also knew that the headstrong daughter of his employer could be nearly anywhere and in the company of almost anyone. So without hesitation, he summoned the Baylor brothers and Leon Scranton from their posts on the outer pens. The young cowboys arrived in his office a half hour later.
Bucky, you and Bart and Leon need to find this girl.
Hallam spoke seriously to the pair of obese twins and their doe-eyed and remarkably emaciated companion.
You boys are the smartest fellers I got on the payroll, and I expect if anyone can find her, y'all can do it.
Yes, sir, I reckon we can. Bucky grinned, and after tugging his jeans to secure them beneath his overhanging gut, said, Leon fooled around with her a couple of times. He might know a couple of places we could look.
That true, Leon?
Claude Hallam looked skeptically at the Scranton boy. Yes, sir. Leon hung his head, grinning. She said she wanted to ride on my pony, and I figured it wouldn't hurt none. Both Bucky and Bart guffawed loudly at Leon's comment. In fact, Bucky found the statement so amusing he farted, forcing his brother to collapse onto a bench.
I'm serious, boys, damn it. If Doreen's been gone 2 days now, and her paw's about to shit a pig pen, we have to find that gal, or he's liable to fire the lot of us.
We'll find her, C.H., Bart managed, wiping his eyes, still chuckling. Claude Hallam looked sternly at the 3 young men, wondering if they were up to the task. He knew the gigantic twins approached their duties with diligence, if not aptitude. Unfortunately, he couldn't spare his best men. Claude's previous comment about them being the best men had been flattery. The pens were crowded with steers from the spring drives. If intellect failed, the Baylor twins could at least win with intimidation. Both men, despite their clownish personalities, had pronounced mean streaks. Claude recalled how the 2 brothers had beaten one of the colored pen riders so badly the man died. The twins had been given a stern warning, but since the man was black, nothing more was said. Claude knew little of the Scranton boy, except that no complaints had been registered by any of the others about his work. The boy appeared to be just another rail-thin cowpuncher with hay-colored hair and the usual hard-creased straw hat. Scranton had mentioned, however, that he knew the Tarwater girl, so Claude directed the next question to Leon.
You got any ideas where this gal might be?
No, sir, unless she's over to the Pennyback.
Why would she be there?
Well, that's a general spot where Billy Dixon has him a drink or two.
Doreen's got a liking for Dixon's big gun,
Bart said, causing Bucky to giggle.
Yeah, I hear how Billy likes to show every one of them gals his big 50,
Bucky said. Hallam wiped his brow but didn't smile. He had heard the stories about Doreen. Most he deemed to be exaggeration. Even so, everyone knew that Theo's daughter enjoyed the company of men.
So you're thinking maybe she's with that buffalo hunter out over at the saloon?
I reckon she could be. Hallam looked nervously at the three young men.
I need you fellers to split up. Bucky, you and Bart, ask around the stockyards. See if anyone has seen or heard anything. Scranton, go over to the saloon and find out if she's with that gunslinger.
As the three Penriders left the office, the Baylor brothers pulled Leon to one side.
We'll go over to the saloon and you check out the stockyards.
That ain't what Mr. Hallam said do, the skinny cowboy protested.
All he said was one of us should look around the stockyards and the other was to go to the saloon to see if she's with Billy Dixon.
Bart gave Leon a stern glare.
We're going to the saloon whilst you look around here.
Mr. Hallam told me I was to go to the saloon. I reckon that's the proper way to do it. I don't want to go against what Mr. Hallam done told me.
That just ain't what was said.
Bucky pushed his enormous gut into the scrawny cowboy, pinning him against the pine board corral.
He said we were to split up and check around the stockyards and at the saloon. He made no mention of which was to go where. Did you hear anything like that, Bart?
No, sir, weren't no such statement made.
Yeah, but ain't no buts about it. Besides, it's safer if we go to the saloon, 'cause I've heard that Mr. William Dixon can be itchy on the trigger. You're liable to say something that would get him riled up and end up shot.
I've been to the Pennyback, and he ain't never shot me, nor anyone.
He ain't going to shoot you unless you speak to him directly.
I was just going to ask him about that gal.
Yes, sir, that's why we're going. You start asking a man about a gal, and before you know it, guns is drawn, and folks is lying dead on the hardwood.
Bart spoke the words with deep sincerity, spat, then looked with narrow, distant eyes into the sun.
Takes a brave man to question a gunslinger about his gal, Bucky added.
The scrawny cowboy, with a look of deep confusion, peered back and forth at the two brothers, started to speak, and then, with a sigh, said, "Well, sir, I guess I'll best get to asking around the stockyards."
Yes, sir.
Billy Dixon sat quietly at his usual table at the Pennyback Saloon, wondering if his good friend Sneaky Jack Batlow would be coming by for their usual faro game. He noted the entrance of the Baylor brothers only because of their sheer size. The appearance of the two bull-like cowboys became alarming, however, when they approached his table. Dixon, an experienced buffalo hunter and scout, had recently gained a reputation as a gunslinger because of an incident that had occurred 2 weeks earlier. On that day, an annoying drunk had disturbed the entire saloon, refusing to leave. Dixon, fed up and fairly drunk himself, drew his pistol and, after taking careful aim, shot the man's glass from the bar. When the man turned, Dixon fired a second shot, this time exploding a bottle of whiskey that sat alongside the shattered glass. There had been a good deal of surprised talk and exaggerated retelling of the story. In the following days, Dixon had been approached by two different men with low-slung pistols and angry looks in their eyes. Fortunately, he was able to redirect the would-be challengers each time by offering drinks and a card game. Dixon had no desire to be a gunslinger, so the approach of the two Baylor brothers filled him with apprehension. With one hand below the table, he tensed. "What do you boys want?" Bucky quickly removed his hat, then nudged his brother, who did the same. For a moment, the twins seemed struck dumb by the celebrity of the renowned buffalo hunter.
"If you're looking for a gunfight, you might just as well get on down the road. I ain't looking for no trouble from the likes of you, and it would pain me to have to tell your mama I done shot her boys."
Dixon narrowed his eyes, leaning back in the chair to reveal a hand resting on his pistol.
No, sir, we ain't looking for no trouble," Bucky stuttered. "Our mama's dead, so if you killed us, you wouldn't have to say nothing," Bart added. "Shut up, Bart."
Bucky, normally regarded as the smarter of the pair, glared at his brother.
"We just came because our boss's daughter run off, and we heard you might have some idea where the gal got off to."
Dixon looked first at one of the Baylors and then at the other. "You boys drink whiskey?" As chance would have it, Billy Dixon did have information that would prove useful to the Baylors. 2 days earlier, Dixon had found Doreen Tarwater waiting anxiously outside the Pennyback.
She was pouring tears like a thunderstorm and talking about how her daddy kept her in. Seems to me the gal needed keeping in.
Dixon enjoyed the fact that the two huge cowpunchers seemed not only interested in what he was saying, but completely awed by his presence.
Anyhow, she told me how she planned to go to her daddy's stockyard and hide herself away in the first wagon out of town. The girl's a bit flighty, if you ask me.
"Well, I'll be damned," Bucky exclaimed.
"I'll bet she run off somewhere. You think it's likely she would have done it?" Bart asked.
"Well, she wasn't exactly a bright gal. Seemed like she might do something foolish," Dixon said.
"Oh, boy," Bart said. "Doreen up and run, I bet."
After thanking the buffalo hunter several times and declining his offer of a second whiskey and cards, Bucky and Bart left the saloon and returned to the stockyard and Claude Hallam's office. As luck would have it, Leon Scranton had discovered, after speaking to a pair of cowboys near the railway loading chutes, that Doreen had been seen near the Mercantile on the day in question. Hallam sent the trio to the store, where they learned that 3 days earlier the owner had 2 customers from out of town. The first, a Kansas farmer, had loaded 3 wagons with lumber and cottonseed feed. The second, 2 colored men, left just after lunchtime with 2 wagons loaded with milled lumber and general household goods. So, after surmising Doreen's likely flight in one of 2 sets of wagons, Hallam sent word to Theo. By the time his message arrived, however, the stockyard owner had imbibed too much whiskey, and a 3rd day passed. Nevertheless, the following morning, Theo, once again hungover and bleary-eyed, ordered that Hallam dispatch 2 groups of men after the 2 sets of wagons. Claude Hallam thought it unlikely that Doreen would climb into a wagon driven by colored men, so he sent one of his best men along with the doe-eyed Leon Scranton in pursuit of the Kansas farmer. Since Claude believed in being thorough, he dispatched Bucky and Bart Baylor onto the trail of Cecil Johnson and Mr. Sugars.
Where exactly should we look for them? Bucky asked. Indian Territory is all I know. It's a good patch of country. Bart scratched his butt, which he sometimes did in moments of confusion or deep thought. Can you be a bit more specific on the directions? Nope. Well, sir, what happens if we don't find them? Bucky asked. Ask anyone you see on the trail. If you can't find them in 3 or 4 weeks, come back in and we'll go from there. Hallam figured if Doreen hadn't shown up in that time, at least Theo's mood might have eased some. What if we run into some Indian folks over there? Bart asked. It's likely that you will. You should ask if they've seen the gal. Should we buy some gifts to give folks so they don't take our scalps? Maybe some beads or something? Bucky asked. Dang redskins don't want beads, Bart said. Well, what do they want, Mr. Know-it-all? Bucky sneered. Whiskey's what they want, and that's exactly the wrong thing to give 'em. Only thing worse than a mean Indian is a drunk mean Indian. You boys are idiots, Claude Hallam said. Be respectful and the Indians won't bother you. We have cattle drives coming up that Shawnee Trail and Chisholm Trail 5 or 6 times a month. Just behave in a civil manner. Most native folks are as reasonable as you or I. I've seen plenty of them in town here and never had a problem. Yeah, that's here in town, and they weren't drunk. Bart raised a knowing eyebrow. And what if they can't speak no English? Lots of them folks just stares at you when you talk to them. Just get out of here. I want you on the trail tomorrow morning. Get a big sack of grub at the store, enough for 3 or 4 weeks. Here's $50 for expenses. Get 4 good mules from the stockyards. You need 2 teams. You sure as hell don't want to be on foot. And get plenty of rounds. You may have to do some hunting. Yeah, or shoot us a colored boy. Bucky grinned at Bart. Don't shoot anyone, Claude Hallam said. Your job is to find Miss Doreen. Got it? We can't shoot a no-good colored mule farmer? No. Why not? I mean, he kidnapped Miss Doreen. Didn't Billy Dixon say that Doreen bragged about stowing away on a wagon leaving town? Claude Hallam looked critically at Bucky and Bart, wondering if he had made the right decision to send them after Cecil Johnson. Yes, sir, that's what he said. Dixon said Doreen was planning to stow away so she could leave town. Does that sound like kidnapping? Bucky looked askance at Claude, knitting his brow in concentration. I don't follow you, Mr. Hallam. Claude paused. If Miss Tarwater got into these men's wagon of her own free will, is that kidnapping? You can't kill a man just for giving a lady a ride. It ain't just a ride if a colored man's involved, is it? Bart looked genuinely puzzled. What difference does it make if the man is white or black? Claude glared at Bart. Maybe I should just find someone else to take this trip. No. Bucky waved his hands. We got what you're saying. We can't just up and shoot a man unless you're sure he's done an actual crime. That's right. Claude kneaded his temples, thinking of who else he might pull from the stockyard. He had already gone through the list. With the cool weather, they would have lots of cattle and other livestock arriving. His best men couldn't be spared, and the rest were either too young or had wives and children. Boys, Claude let out an exasperated sigh. Do not kill anyone. You understand me? Do not kill anyone." Bucky and Bart looked at one another, and Bucky winked at his brother. "Yes, sir," the pair said in unison. "Okay." Claude waved the two enormous wranglers from his office. "Don't forget, 2 teams of mules." In today's plate of history beans, we'll take a look at author Larry McMurtry. I'm going to assume that many of you are familiar with Larry McMurtry and his Pulitzer Prize-winning novel Lonesome Dove. It was a grand book, one that did a lot to pull the Western genre out of the world of simplistic characters and tired cliches and into the 21st century. Lonesome Dove somehow blends many of the elements that made serial westerns popular in the early and middle parts of the 20th century and gives them the real human qualities that modern audiences want and require. It's not surprising that McMurtry was able to accomplish the task of blending the old with the new. The man was a blend of deep country sensibilities and the sophisticated literary world, and he had the talent, drive, and connections to make it all happen. Larry McMurtry's deep country sensibilities sprang from his early life in a place called Archer City in Texas. McMurtry fictionalized Archer City into a place called Talia for his books, and many of his best works are set in Talia, including one of my favorite contemporary westerns, the novel Leaving Cheyenne. If you're a fan of McMurtry and haven't read the book, let me recommend the title. Leaving Cheyenne is one of McMurtry's earliest books, and the second book of what is sometimes called the Talia Trilogy, which includes the novels Horsemen Pass By, sometimes called HUD after the movie with Paul Newman, Leaving Cheyenne, and Last Picture Show. Leaving Cheyenne may be the least well-known of those 3 novels, but it's a personal favorite of mine. The novel is about a trio of country folks, Gideon, Johnny, and Molly, and the love triangle betwixt the 3 of them. I'll talk more about how this love triangle has echoes in McMurtry's own personal life in a moment, but first, I want to explore the story in Leaving Cheyenne. Like many of McMurtry's best works, the characters spring from the page, each with their own distinctive personality. Gideon is stern and responsible, Johnny carefree and kind, and Molly lively, enigmatic, and loving. It's a beautiful book that takes the characters through their lives from their teenage years until they're old and gray. Only McMurtry could have written the book, and like the other books in the Talia trilogy, it gives the reader real insight into what life was like in the contemporary Old West. McMurtry was also a scholar, and as such, he found his way into some of the most renowned literary circles of the time. After high school in Archer City, McMurtry went to North Texas State University. He received a master's degree from Rice University in Houston. From there, he went to Stanford University in the Los Angeles area, and with the help of a Wallace Stegner Fellowship, became part of a group of writers that defined the post-World War II writing scene. By the way, Wallace Stegner is another writer you should check out if you're a fan of contemporary Western literature. While at Stanford, McMurtry made the connections he needed to enter the exclusive world of literary publishing. He also met the writer and American icon Ken Kesey, the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Kesey was also there working on a Wallace Stegner Fellowship. They became friends. It was during that period that McMurtry completed his first book, The Amazing Horsemen Pass By, the book that became the movie.
HUD. If you haven't read that one, get your Kindle and buy it now. It's amazing. Let me take a detour at this point. In case you don't know about Ken Kesey, he was more than just the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Kesey also headed up a group of folks called the Merry Pranksters. The adventures of the Merry Pranksters are memorialized in the book Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by author Tom Wolfe. Wolfe's book, which is nonfiction, is about the travels of the Merry Pranksters cross-country on a wildly painted bus called Further. The book is also wildly entertaining. In Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, Wolfe describes the group's travels, including their stop in Houston, Texas, where the bunch of post-Beat generation hipsters hung out with, you guessed it, Larry McMurtry. So McMurtry was right there in the thick of it, right from his earliest years. Now, you may recall how earlier in this brief and woefully scant look at Larry McMurtry, I mentioned the love triangle in Leaving Cheyenne. How many of you knew that McMurtry, later in his life, following some severe health issues and the death of Ken Kesey in 2001, married Kesey's former wife, Norma Faye Kesey? I don't know if the love triangle in Leaving Cheyenne has any echoes in the relationship between Kesey, his wife, and McMurtry. After all, almost 50 years passed between the publication of Leaving Cheyenne and McMurtry's marriage to Norma Faye. Still, it's interesting how things work out. If you read the novel Leaving Cheyenne, you will find some other interesting parallels to these three folks and the evolution of their lives. There's lots more I could say about Larry McMurtry. As is always the case, the plate of history beans is barely enough to get you through until the next meal. If you're a McMurtry fan and loved Lonesome Dove, dive into some of McMurtry's other books. I think you'll find that across the board, he has a way of making characters leap from the page. I've read many, perhaps all of his books. You might start with what I think are some of his best books. The Talia Trilogy, Horsemen Pass By, or HUD as it is called because of the movie, Leaving Cheyenne, and Last Picture Show. If you're looking for grand sweeping series of books, the Barry Bender narratives, 4 books written in his later years, are excellent, and in their way as rich and entertaining as the Lonesome Dove series. That's it for today's Plate of History Beans. Again, if you like my channel, I hope you'll hit the subscription button. I would truly appreciate it. Thanks again, and see you next time for another chapter from my novel Hunting Charm and another Plate of History Beans here on the Contemporary Old West channel with B.F. Biles.